On this episode of Into the Unknown, I am joined with a very special guest, Ryan Michael Harding. Ryan and I have known each other for a few years now and are actually connected through his sister KJ. Shout out KJ, appreciate you. When KJ and I were out in California, I met Ryan and it was kind of like an instant connection. We were both very interested and curious about what each other did, and the friendship kind of just formed from there. I love learning about what he's up to and kind of what he's been doing. And this was one of those opportunities where I was able to learn a little more. And I would say this was probably the longer episode. This is definitely the longest recording we did because we were talking for almost 2 hours, just catching up. And I just love learning more about what other people do. I'm fortunate in my career and his career very similar that we do stuff that's a little off the more typical path that most people are on. And so it was just great to learn a little bit more about his world and what he does. So let's get into this. All right, today I'm joined with my good friend Ryan Michael Harding. How you doing today, Ryan?
I'm doing really well. Thanks for having me.
I love to hear
This
it.
is really cool.
Let's jump into it. I want to start out with your origin story. Think about that comic book issue number 1. Who are you and where are you from?
I'm from the Midwest, Green Bay, Wisconsin, the peninsula. Divorced family, so my dad lived a little bit further north in Sturgeon Bay. My mom lived in Luxembourg, and then also part of Green Bay a little bit as well. So I guess my origin story is like the peninsula of Wisconsin, and I just grew up in those areas and in between those areas and just sort of fell in love with like storytelling, I think, from a very early age. Just loved movies, and that just sort of developed into structure of a story. And then I think one of my favorite things early on was listening to other people just tell stories verbally. I think that's a huge thing in the Midwest where you kind of you get together with your friends and you're usually drinking or eating, and the best part of it is just telling stories with each other. And I've grown up around some like really really great storytellers who like I always thought deserved a bigger audience. And yeah, it always fascinated me just like captivating people with like even like a simple 5-minute story of like their day because they're just good storytellers. And yeah, that's sort of like movies kind of tied into that, and I was like, that's kind of the ultimate pinnacle of storytelling in our day of age. So I was like, I want to do that. Just started looking at schools. I didn't know anything about cameras or lighting or post workflow or like budgeting, or I didn't know anything. So it was just like a fascination of storytelling, and then I was like, well, I need to start filming shit. So what do? You just film your buddies doing dumb shit, So that I was like that guy, I was always the friend with the camera. I was always like, okay, let's reset that, let's do that again, and then you get like a horrible camera angle of it, but like it's your buddy like jumping a mini bike off of something, or like, you know what I mean. So that's sort of the camera tied into that a little bit, and I didn't really know what I was doing, but I was like a little bit ahead of everyone else as far as like working with a camera and framing. And then somebody pointed out to me, they're like, you should just do film school. Like that's what film school is.
Those interesting things you mentioned is just, I think, something we find usually by accident, some of our passions, is really falling into it and just doing things because you like them. And I think that's not talked about enough. I was in the same boat with history. When I got to college, wasn't a great student, just started taking history classes because I found them interesting. Halfway through my sophomore year, I'd taken almost every history class I could. So I was told I probably should do something with that. So I just want to say I love that kind of finding your passion while you're just messing around. It's great when you combine what you actually like to do.
Yeah, I really, really relate to that. I was a terrible student. I was an awful student. Not because, like, I mean, I'm kind of an idiot, but I'm not super dumb. Like I'm smart with certain things. I just didn't apply myself because I was just like this hyperactive kid who just like was only interested in like my hyper focus. You know what I mean? Which was just like, I want to tell stories. How do I do that? How do I do that? You know what I mean? Like I could care less about geometry and stuff like that.
What got you into Full Sail, correct? What interested you about that school?
So a few things. They do have a great reputation for the arts. Specifically, I think it was a recording school. It started as for the recording arts, and then their second thing they kind of branched off of was filmmaking, but it was like majority centered around cinematography, which is, for those of us who don't know, cinematography is the art of filmmaking within the frame. So that it's a cinematographer is somebody who designs the shots in a film, right? Before they're even in the editing room, it's like, how do we design those shots and what do they mean psychologically? And it's everything to do with that. It's what's in the frame. It's the lighting that you use. It's the lenses that you use. It's the camera that you use. It's how the camera moves. So all of that is designed beforehand, and that's sort of what got me into Full Sail. So they're pretty highly regarded for that, and that's what I wanted to do because I found out what cinematography was, and it was like the filmmaking and the storytelling and the design behind that. And that's literally like everything that I was like, I didn't know how to put that in words, right? Before even thinking, hey, film school is an option. Um, and I was like, oh, it's cinematography. That's what that is. So Full Sail was very interesting to me in that regard. But it was also great because I was sort of meandering through life at the time. I was in a tech college, NWTC in Green Bay, in like a digital media, I think they called it at the time, which was just like a very broad, very, very broad program. And I wasn't doing much. And Full Sail is a 2-year bachelor's degree. And I had spent like a year and a half basically failing out of school in this community college. So it was kind of just like a 2-for-1 for me, where like I could still get a bachelor's degree in 4 years with like the rest of my friends, and I was doing what I really wanted to do.
Now, where is Full Sail? How did that all work?
Full Sail's in Florida. It's in a little city called Winter Park, city town. It's pretty small. If you look it up on the map, it's basically Orlando, Florida, Central Florida. I decided on that, applied, got in, and then took some online classes to get a head start. And then I moved out there. My best friend helped me move, and I just started applying for apartments. It's not like a typical college. It's got like a community college feel, and that like you live off of campus. Like you have to get an apartment. There's no dorms or anything like that, but it's got like a very fast-paced curriculum because it's 2-year bachelor degree. It's kind of like a weird hybrid school, but I enjoyed it. Had my own place, signed my first lease on my own.
It's really part of that journey, man, that you picked up from Wisconsin and moved everything to Florida. What was that feeling like?
And I look at that now as like, I think, how old was I? I must have been like 22, 23. And yeah, I look at that now and it's kind of crazy that I had that confidence because I'm kind of an introverted dude, to be honest. So I think it really helped. My best friend Zach was like, "Yeah, dude, I'll move you. Let's do it." And then he was like, "I will just hang out after we move you. We'll just hang out in Orlando for a month. It'll be cool because I didn't have school right away. I did some online classes and it was like a break. So he's like, it'll be perfect timing. We'll do that." So I think that really gave me the confidence. Always have the homies to help you out in your life. But it was crazy once we got there, and then like it was like my apartment, and I was in kind of across the country, just like straight down, pretty far away from my parents. Like I don't have that lifeline anymore. You're a young kid, and then they drove away, and I was like, cool, this is wild. It was freeing, and I would suggest most people do that. To be honest, it's kind of just like jumping into a pool, and it's kind of nice to not have those lifelines because then it's like you're forced to like think on your own and grow up and be an adult, and it definitely helped me work hard in school, and I never done that before, and it was like I think one of my professors at the time. He's like an old, like a grizzly dude, and will just tell you the way it is. And he said in like my first class, he was like, "Look, this school, you don't have to be here longer than this class period, but like you're gonna get out what you put in," and that just stuck with me. So I think being on my own and moving as far away as I did, and like having my name on a lease and like that responsibility, it just like it felt really good to um, have to be relying on myself to do the best I can and get out the most I could out of school. I would highly recommend anyone do that if they're like, I don't know if I should move far away from home. Do it.
I completely agree with that, man. I've lived in 7 cities, about 4 states now. And exactly, Ryan, exactly what you said with the
What?
taking that chance. It's on your own. You're doing it. And really, I would say it's sink or swim, but at the same time, cutting that lifeline off, even for a while, even geographically, it's one of those things. It's freeing. It's exciting. You kind of get to see what you're about, what you enjoy, what you don't enjoy. The worst thing that happens, it doesn't work out and you move back. But that internal clock, I feel like inside you is like, this has to work. For all the things I've told people, all the things I've said,
This has to work. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you should do that to yourself. I think you should motivate yourself.
let's fast forward a little bit. So I know you're not in Florida anymore. How did you get to where you are now?
I graduated, and the same month I moved out to Los Angeles because I was just like ready and I wanted to be ahead of people, and I knew if I waited that I would probably get stuck and I would be lazy and be like content, you know. So I was just like, I didn't want any wait time, so I like scheduled my move like the week after my graduation. We drove like a 26-foot truck with my car on the trailer on the back across the country. It was the craziest thing ever. But again, you gotta just make shit work. You're like, cool, like I'm on my own. We're doing this. Let's make it happen.
Once you got to Los Angeles, what did that career look like? I know for more in the, if you'd say normal sphere of jobs, you go find a job, you apply, you work your 9 to 5, and you go home. I'm pretty aware that's not quite your case in your field.
It's terrifying. It's terrifying. It is a very hard industry to break in, and I didn't know a single person in Los Angeles that worked in film. The only benefit I had really is it's Hollywood, right? So it's like at least I'm in the spot that is like the filmmaking place. You know what I mean? So at that point, it's kind of just like networking, and then just making sure people know you and that you work hard. But it is terrifying. it is. It's tough to do. Not impossible. My start was I made a few contacts at like just like a little get together. Like honestly, it was at a bar, right? And I was just networking. I knew there was going to be people there that I knew, and that there was going to be people there that were like friends of friends that I was like, I probably should meet these people because they've been out here for like 2 years. So that's what I did, and I got a call for a PA job like a week later. A PA is a production assistant. You're like the bottom of the totem pole. You're like the backbone of a film crew. You pick up the garbage. You go on runs. You pick up crew and drop them off on set. It's just all of the grunt work. But it's important. It's important to have people that can do that and they're good at that.
That's getting your foot in the door. No matter what you're doing, you're at least you're there and you're
Exactly.
starting. And as you mentioned earlier, it's that showing how hard you work, showing your work ethic. I think in Wisconsin and the Midwest, we do have a Midwestern work ethic that I think people across the country start to notice, whether they realize it or not. They see how hard people from our area honestly work, and it's not the same everywhere. That's one thing I learned about moving all over. So once you got that PA role, what was next?
So it was like it's this new category out here called digital media. It's classified as. It's not a feature film and it's not network TV. But with all the YouTube and the streaming, they had to sort of come up with a different classification for the unions and stuff. That's a whole different thing. But it's called digital media, and it's just a bigger. It's a studio, but they're making content for online platforms like YouTube. So it was with that studio, and luckily they were making so much content, and they were shooting like 3 weeks out of the month, which was incredible for a guy like me who's like, it's really hard to find like a full time job as a freelancer, especially in film. So great for a guy like me who is like trying to pay bills and make it work. And luckily, they kept calling me back and calling me back, and I sort of climbed the ranks in there a little bit. And I was there for about 2 years, I would say. I got to the point where they were sort of offering me a full time position there, which was really cool at the time, and sort of got into the role that I have now, but on like the lower levels of it. So I was just data managing essentially, and what that is like I'm just making sure the footage that comes off the camera is safe. So you take the digital card, and I'm just immediately making copies of it, so like nothing will corrupt or break or get lost. And that's important because like they're dumping like 50 grand into a day, and it's like if that footage gets lost, it's like 50K down the drain. And that's just a role that I fell into because I didn't want a PA anymore, and they needed the help. And I was, I networked with the camera department that were salary in the studio, and I sort of got my foot in the door there. And then I started to get it offered like bigger and bigger jobs and bigger scale jobs. And the YouTube studio was like very cool, and I like was definitely able to like pay my bills through that, but it wasn't like the most fulfilling content. It wasn't very cool. I wasn't getting like credit for a lot of things, and I didn't have like a creative say.
One of the things about going on this journey, if everyone knew the blueprint to success, going from point A to point B to point C, and they were told the exact instructions, everyone would do it because that would be the easiest. It would be the path of least resistance. Can you think of a time on your journey so far that we've talked about where you had a opportunity to go, maybe the one you're leading into, going one way and you chose a different way, not really knowing the outcome, but kind of jumping in?
Yeah, I think I got ahead of you a little bit there. I think that was the moment. I was toying with, being a salaried employee at a fairly successful studio, or just keeping my freelance network open and being my own boss and controlling my schedule and my rates and my work hours. And to me, that was very important. So that was definitely the fork in the road. Luckily, I saw a lot of people that I look up to that were my age and sort of in the same boat as me. They took salary jobs, and they kind of ended up getting exploited. They were doing, like 60, 70-hour weeks. And I was like, that's not cool. Like once you start breaking down the salary to the hours, it's like you're getting paid like almost minimum wage. Like that's not fair. I don't want to do that. I knew I had to meet people in my industry that were doing the same thing as me, but on a way higher level. So that was my next goal. I had a little bit of money saved up, um, so I didn't have to rely on that studio anymore for my income. I could say no to them a few times, and then sort of have time to network and meet people and do freelance gigs. So I focused all my time on just finding other professionals that were like bona fide DITs out here, digital imaging techs. It's the science behind the image. So I do a lot of measuring of light and color, and making sure that it looks very pretty by the time it gets off of set, so they don't have to do any fixing. It's already like it looks great, right? Everything's exposed right. Everyone's skin tones look right, and that's super helpful on set because for the director of photography or the cinematographer, they don't want to sit there and measure light and images. They want to like design the shots, and there's a lot that goes into that. So I'm kind of the step right below that. The mad scientist on set, basically, is how I would describe it. I'm just sitting there measuring images, making sure all the footage is safe, and like telling the DP that he's exposed correctly, or I'll make changes, I'll make lighting changes. But I wasn't doing any of that. I knew I could be doing that, but at the time I was like, all right, I need to find people that are doing this because it's such a niche thing. I didn't know anyone that was doing it at that level at the time, but I knew it was possible, and I knew what they were getting paid. And I was like, okay, we have to get there. So I just met a few people. I just invited them to get some coffee with me. Some people responded. Some people were assholes. Some people totally ghosted me. And the people that I've met in my network now um, reached back out to me, and they're like, absolutely, let's get coffee. And they're like the best people that I know in Los Angeles to this. I guess that's another thing I would say is like, for anyone that's like advice moving to a city alone, not knowing anyone, just like ask people to hang out. They're gonna be awesome. Most likely, they're gonna be awesome, and they're gonna reach back out to you, and they're gonna want to share their knowledge.
Especially as you mentioned, moving out place by yourself. I don't think we always realize because we're in our own little world how many other people are doing the exact same thing in some way, shape, or form in the same city.
Yeah, absolutely. And for a freelancer, it's like that's where your jobs come from, right? Like my jobs come from 50%, I would say, from other DITs, and like 50% from producers that call me back. If you can't make a lasting impression, um, then you're not going to make it as a freelancer, So I realized that, and that's why I was just like, we got to start taking shots in the dark here and just like asking these people that I see on IMDb that are doing like crazy shows if they want to get coffee, and just let me ask them questions. And like, I mean, that's the easiest way to get a phone number. And then, those guys are going to have work that like comes their way, and they're not going to want to do it because they're going to, consider it low paying or below them, or they're going to be booked. But then they can pass it to you. And then if you make a good impression, it's going to make them look good. And then then you're part of their network, and then their network becomes your network, and then it grows from there. I go to every single job to this day knowing that it's also a job interview, even if it's a callback. Like if I've worked with that crew and that producer and that director, like I go in with the mindset that this is a job interview. I have to do a good job because I want them at the end of the day to remember me and be like, Ryan made my day easier because of his knowledge and skills. And I also want them to mention me if someone else is like, hey, do you know a good DIT in Los Angeles? They're going to be like, absolutely, here's Ryan. And then their network becomes my network. And that's sort of the goal, I think, for anyone who's trying to be a freelancer.
Ryan, I love that. I love that. I think what you said is really important. And I always tell people when you put your name on something, which of course as a credit you do, you want that name to represent who you actually are and your work ethic and how you do things. So as you mentioned, you can continue to get jobs, get bookings, and continue to build your career. So the title of the podcast, Into the Unknown. What's next for you, man? What are you working on? What are your plans going forward? How are you stepping into the unknown?
The way someone explained jumping into Los Angeles in the film world to me is like you got to figure out how to like pay the bills, and then you after that you can sort of figure out how do I make this work and like for what I want to do. So I think I'm finally confident to say that like now I'm being a little bit of an entrepreneur. I would say I'm doing some interesting things with some friends. One thing we're doing this week is I was tasked with sort of inventing a camera system slash workflow that would capture a golf swing in like ultra slow mo. But the catch was like we have to capture that and then send it to a phone in like minutes. So we have like a robot arm with a camera that's shooting like 500 frames a second, and we can get it to you. It can get you the captured image of you swinging a golf club in slow motion in like 3 minutes, which is like pretty cool, I think. So we're doing that, and hopefully it takes off, and we can like go to other like golf tournaments and do that. And like I want to shoot like Phil Mickelson doing a golf swing in front of a high speed camera. Like that would be sick. So that's sort of the goal. That's a little entrepreneur thing I'm setting up with my friend. My friend Zach, who's like one of the most creative and talented filmmakers I know, he was like, we should start doing animation and motion capture. I was like, dog, I don't know if you know this, but we don't do that. Like, we went to film school. We like shoot things. And he's like, no, check this out. So, long story short, we started doing renders in Unreal Engine, and I was like, this is kind of like a cool thing. And I think there's been a lot of like strides in technology as far as like Unreal Engine and sort of AI generation and that whole world and how it's integrating into like cinematography is actually really wild. If you guys haven't watched Andor or The Mandalorian and like what they're doing in the volume and how they're creating like ambient light that's natural for like actors, it's wild. So I'm trying to do this like mocap company with my friend Zach, and we're sort of venturing. It's like a little fork in the road. My bread and butter work is like high end commercials, but it's cool. It's cool to work with like the huge brands, right? Like it's cool to see like the inner circle and like how they work essentially, and how each company is like different, and a lot of them are like pretty creative actually. Like there's some creative commercials out there, so it's kind of fulfilling, and they're quick days, and it's been fun. Yeah, I haven't done any features recently. I haven't done any. I did Emily the Criminal like a year and a half ago, 2 years ago at this point, but that was the last feature I did that was like notable, I would say.
Ryan, I love that you said doing those features, and I mean that's impressive to anyone working on those big brands. I think sometimes in people like you and I are fields that are very unique. They're different than what most people do on a day to day. I think our mundane becomes ridiculously interesting to outsiders. The fact that you're working with big brands and commercials, it's something you kind of you're used to now. But I think it's just impressive that it's something you're able to work on. And I think sometimes we don't realize how unique what we're doing is until you look back and you're like, oh, that was pretty cool.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you for saying that. I do. I just need that. From very early on, I realized I just needed like a complete reset of every day. Like in school, it was the same way. I think that's why I was a terrible student. And maybe you kind of relate to that. Like, yeah, I just need like a new set of like problems and solutions every day, and that's like literally filmmaking. Like nothing's gonna go right, and you kind of just have to be really good at adapting and just going with the flow and like just handling your stuff, staying calm and collected and problem solving.
Before we close out, man, I just wanted to say how impressive of a job you do. It's really awesome. I've just been able to watch kind of you grow over the last few years, and it's really cool to see all the cool things you're doing out there, man. So I just want to give you your props right here, man. It's pretty cool.
Dude, thank you so much for saying that, man. Yeah, you and I keep in touch pretty well. It's like over Instagram, but you always hit me up. And you're like, "Yo, that's cool. That's." You send me the fire emoji, which gets me stoked every time. Yeah, I want to give you a shout out for being so professional. I really think your podcast will take off. I hope it takes off, and I think you're like way ahead of the game as far as professionalism, organization, and in content and um, structure. Like it's like that is huge stuff that you're doing that other people are just like, I just need a camera and we need to record ourselves talking. Like you have the format already. You're making like professional content, so it's really cool to see that. And I was really stoked that you asked me to be a part of it.
So in closing, so if people want to find you, where can they look you up online? Where can they find you on social media? People who want to learn more about what you do, learn more about your industry, or just kind of see what you're up to.
So I have a website. It's mostly just color work I do. Digital imaging technicians are basically on-set colorists, so I do a little post color work as well, like finishing work for films in my spare time in my own color suite. So I have a website highlighting that past work. It needs to be updated. It will be shortly, and it's just my name, ryanmichaelharding.com. If anyone wants to know more about DITs and what we do and just like the film industry in general, feel free to look me up on Instagram. I'm pretty sure Jeremy will plug the Instagram handle right now. Just shoot me a message. That's the best way to get a hold of me. If I don't know who you are, just shoot me a message. I'm pretty open to it. I one important thing to me and like a lot of the people that I've met out here is sort of breaking the um, trajectory of like not wanting to help new people build skills in this industry. Like, it's a very old Hollywood thing to be like, no, I don't want to tell you my secrets because then you'll take my jobs. And I think that's a really negative way to look at stuff. And it's also that's why it's very hard to get into the industry. So I wanted to just, destroy that mentality. And I've been building a community of DITs with a few friends of mine that's like not toxic online community, and we help each other and we hang out and we swap stories and we share jobs. So if you want to know more about filmmaking or DIT specifically, just reach out on Instagram and we'll hang out.
Awesome. Thank you so much again, Ryan. It was great talking to you. I'm definitely going to have to make my way out to LA one of these days. I'm looking forward to it.
Please, please do. You're always welcome. Doors
Take it
open.
easy,
Don't
man.
bother knocking.